Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to take Sons and Lovers, a beautiful novel of the 20th century by D.H. Lawrence. It's a very famous novel because, as you know, D.H. Lawrence is a very influential novelist. He introduced new things and ideas, themes, points of view in his novel. Um, we talked about him in the previous video, who was D.H. Lawrence and how influential he is as a novelist. And today we're going to take chapter 1 from part 1 of his novel, his one of his famous novels, which is Sons and Lovers. You see, the novel is said to be autobiographical because it represents many aspects of Lawrence's life, his relationship with his mother, and his relationship with other women. Uh, let's see. You see, from the very beginning of the novel, everything is set clear for the reader. There is the setting. It all takes place in a place called the Bottoms. Characters are all there. We have Mr. and Mrs. Morel. We have William, their son, who's 7 years old. We have Annie, their uh, their girl, their young girl. She's 5 years old, and Mrs. Morel is pregnant in chapter 1. The novelist here, Lawrence, states the problem that that's the central part in the novel, which is the marriage, the disturbed marriage, and the bad family relationship between them, between the husband and wife. There are lots of motifs in the novel. We have nature, landscape, geography. These are very important because each time you have nature representing different aspects and an influencer on the personality of the character. Themes, we have many themes. Most importantly, we have Oedipus complex, we have bondage, we have men versus women's roles, we have the use of a flashback. Okay, the novel starts with a very new kind of setting in novels of the 20th century. Why? Because Lawrence takes us to a miner's village and a middle class family. We can see through their daily life routine, how they live, how they eat, how they fight, what are their daily problems, how do they cope with them. And he vividly describes it simply because his father was a miner. He used in coal mining. He was a coal miner. So he's describing basically his boyhood. So Uh, Sons and Lovers is set in a town of Bestwood in England, where in the late 80s. It's a mining country and the dwellings are built. He beautifully describes it as what? He describes them. He says bottoms consist of 6 blocks of miner dwellings, 2 rows of 3, like the dots on a blank 6 domino, 12 houses in a block. This double row of a dwelling sat at the foot of a rather sharp slope from Bestwood and looked out, from the attic window at least, on the slow climb of the valley toward the slubby. Okay, each miner has his own dwelling house. They lived next to each other. And Mrs. Morel was very happy that she's changing places and moving to this new dwelling place. And she even, geography here is very important. You have to pay attention to the details, how he described the houses of these miners, the landscape, and notice that although their dwellings are they are good enough, but remember they are all of minor houses, So they are set in an industrial country, black, ash, it's dark, and there are smoke all over the place. Yet each house have the privilege of having its own garden. Mrs. Morel was not anxious to move into the bottoms because she said maybe it's not the best thing that would happen to her. She wished to have a better place, but the house that she get was the last house in the end of the row. So instead of having two neighbors, she have only one, and the other side of her house she have an extra strip of garden. And you see that D.H. Lawrence really concentrate on his family having this garden, because we'll see in many incidents that whenever the characters feel suffocating, intoxicated of the house and the problems inside it, they just get out to the garden, they smell the roses, and they can inhale clear air, although it's a mining country. Uh, but it's a kind of a relief. She enjoyed a kind of aristocracy among the other women because she has this advantage in her house. So then he moves on from the setting, he moves on to the morals themselves. We are introduced to Mrs. Morel, Gertrude, the mother, and then we move to the father. You see the exchange in men and women role. Here, there's a heavy emphasis on women. She was 31 years old. She had been married for 8 years. She's a rather small, delicate, but she is very strong in personality. She's pregnant with her third child. Her husband was a minor. They had only been there in new home for 3 weeks, and there was a fair, which is called the Wakes. So, Mrs. Morel is shown to be very unsatisfied, and she does not like having the fair. We soon realize that she doesn't like it simply because her husband is going to get drunk, and when he gets drunk, he can be very abusive to his children and to his wife. But here we see that they have two children. They are very excited. William, a boy of 7, he was very happy to be on in the fair, so he goes there. But Annie, who was only 5, she stays with her mother. And when the dinner was over, she took her daughter and she went to the fair. Okay. This is a very, very, very important incident here, because in the wakes or in the fair, we notice a very, very unique relationship between William and his mother. The moment he sees his mother, his face lights up. And for many critics, they think that this part of the novel, it starts by incarnating and portraying the concept of Oedipus complex. Oedipus complex is taken from Greek mythology about a hero. His name is Oedipus, who unknowingly killed his father. He thought he was an ordinary king. He didn't know that he was his father. He killed him, and then he married his mother. And of course, he didn't know that she is his mother. So Sigmund Freud, after decades of this myth, he described men who fall in love with their mothers as having Oedipus complex. He has another side of the same complex. It's called Electra complex. When a girl falls in love with her father, it's called Electra complex. But here we have the Oedipus complex, men who fall in love with their mother. And that's why the title of the novel is Sons and Lovers. Here we are going to see that all the boys that Gertrude gave birth to fall in love with her so badly that they are unable to have a healthy relationship with other women. She become their lover. Okay. And of course, it's vice versa, because we're going to see afterwards that Gertrude, the mother, exchanges the love of her husband with children. And instead of falling in love with her husband and keeping his relationship strong, she goes to her sons and instead. She focuses on them because she's disappointed with the father. Okay, so the fear here shows us the very beginning of Oedipus complex, because William here, not like any other child, he sticks to his mother, he wins the prizes, so he pulled from his pocket 2 egg cups, and he presented to his mother his trophies, and she knew that he wanted them for her, that her son loved her so much. See, he was tipful of excitement now she had came, led her about the garden, the ground, showed her everything. Here he's showing you he would not leave her all the time. He stuck close to her. Why? He was proud of her. No other woman looked such a lady as she did, in her little lick bonnet and her cloak. She smiled when she saw women she knew. So she was tired, but he was excited. You see, this paragraph is very important. It shows you how proud, how in love he is with his mommy. For me, it's natural, but for critics, they think that it's Oedipus complex. So we have to respect their point of view. So he was disappointed. He tell, well, are you coming now or later? The mother is asking her child. To which he responds, he says, are you going already? He cried. His face fell full of reproach. Already? It's past 4, I know. What are you going already for? Why are you going home? You needn't come if you don't want to. As she went slowly away with her little girl, whilst her son stood watching her, cut to the heart to let her go, yet unable to leave the wakes. Here is showing you why, how strong he felt. He didn't leave the wakes, and he was angry that his mother is leaving to go home to a man who's drinking in a bar. Okay. So he came. He didn't stay in the wake because he was miserable, because his mother was gone. Since she had gone, he had not enjoyed the wakes. This is the central theme of the novel all over. William, she is the center of his joy. Okay, so let's see what's wrong with the mother. Mrs. Morel was alone, but she was used to it. Her son and her little girl slept upstairs, so it seemed her home was there behind her, fixed and stable, but she felt wretched with the coming child. See, here she is showing us, or the narrator, we don't know who is the narrator, it's a third person, we don't know who, is telling us that she's not happy in her marriage, at least she's not happy in her pregnancy. And the world seemed a dreary place for her where nothing else would happen for her, at least until William grow up. But for herself, nothing but this endurance. You see, she's enduring life and the children. She could not afford to have this child, the third one. She did not want it. The father was what? Serving beer in public house, and he's swelling himself drunk. She despised him. She was tired of him. And this coming child as was too much for her. There were not fun. She's saying here that she is sick of it, sick of her life with him. And if it was not for William and Annie, she would not put up with poverty and ugliness and meanness that she's suffering from. So, of course, we have nature here because she's suffocated from home. We see her, she went into the front garden, feeling heavy to take herself out, yet unable to stay indoors. The heart suffocated her. Okay, she feels as if she were buried alive. Now, he Lawrence here describes in full details the landscape, the garden that she spends the time here. It was a beautiful with flowers. And then we listen to her inner dialogue with herself. What have I to do with it? She said to herself. What have I to do with all this? Even the child I'm going to have. It doesn't seem as if I were taken into account. Sometimes life takes hold of one, carries the body along, accomplish one's history, and yet it's not real, but leaves oneself as if we're slurred over. I wait, Mrs. Morel said to herself. I wait, and what I wait for can never come. So, this makes her go into flashback. Where does she go into flashback? The narrator, he wants to tell us some kind of a background about this character, Gertrude. So he takes us into a flashback. First, she introduces to us as reader her childhood. She came from a good old family. They are famous as being independent. Her father is an engineer. He's handsome, heighty man, proud of his fair skin and blue eyes. He was proud and he's filled with integrity. But, but her mother, and here he's saying Gertrude was a second child. But Gertrude favored her mother. She loved her mother best of all, yet she had the personality of her father. She remembered to have hated her father for overbearing manner towards his gentle and humorous, kindly souled mother. Here she is telling us hints that her father was abusive to his mother, just like her husband is abusive of her. She remembered when she was a school teacher and how she taught in private school. By the way, D.S. Lawrence's mother is the same. She came from the same family, and Lawrence himself was a school teacher. So her flashback moves not only to her childhood, it moves to her girlhood when she was first in love with John Field, who is the man who gave her a Bible as a present. She kept it to to herself, and she cherished the very moment that he gave it to her. And this conversation is also very important, the quotation here, because he doesn't want to get into family business, but his parents are forcing him to do that. Um, so Gertrude remembers how she used to be very strong in telling him, but you say you don't like business, she persuaded. I don't. I hate it, he cried hotly. And you would like to go into the ministry? I should love it if I thought I could make a first-rate preacher. Then why don't you? Why don't you? Her voice raged with defiance. If I were a man, nothing would stop me. She held her head erect. He was rather timid before her. But my father is so stiff-necked. He means to put me into business. And I know he'll do it. But if you are a man, she had cried. Being a man isn't everything, he replied, frowning with puzzled helplessness. Here, in her flashback, she remembers how when she was a girl, she thought that being a man is being in power. And if you are a man, you can do everything. And now, After being a woman, married woman, and a mother of two, pregnant with a third, she knows that being a man is not everything. And she's going to tell us why does she think that. Here, she immediately to moves to her husband, a man who she thought that can do everything. When she was 23 years old, she met at a Christmas party a young man. Okay, who is this young man? He's Walter Morel, her husband. He was 27 years old. He was handsome, smart. He had black hair. He was lively. He danced. He had beautiful colors in him, because he's a minor, that you have smoke and sometimes smudge on his face. He was so lively, dancing. She herself was the opposite. She had a curious, receptive mind. Why? She had the pleasure and amusement in listening to other people. She was clever in leading folk to talk. She loved ideas and she was considered intellectual. Okay. She come from a very Puritan religious family. You know the Puritans. Puritans were a group of people who ruled uh, in a point of history. They were very strictly religious. As you remember, Scarlet Letter was written during the Puritan's time. She comes from a Puritan family. That's why she's very, very, very restricted woman. She's very religious. Here she's remembering how she was attracted to him because he was completely the opposite of her. Okay, so she was to the minor the thing of mystery and fascination. For him, she was a lady, but for her, she was, yes, a thrill to hear him. She watched him, he danced well, and then she thought that he's completely different from her father. Her father was, to her, the type of all men. And because he was different, see, this is important that she was a Puritan like her father, high minded, and really stern. Okay, she looked at him and then she was amused and felt empathy and sympathy for the life of miners, hundreds of them. Here she's imagining his life and how other miners live for their help, hundreds of them toiling below earth and coming up at evening. He seems to her noble. The next Christmas, they were married, and for 3 months, she was perfectly happy. For 6 months, she was very happy. You see, there is a gradual decrease in happiness. In 3 months, she was perfect. After 6 months, she was not perfect. She was very happy. Let's see why. Here, Gertrude's marriage suffered from many disappointments. The first disappointment that she started to talk to him, but he did not understand, and he did not even listen to her. So she had flashes of fear and she was restless and she thought that no, her dreams are lost now. But he was a remarkable handyman. As long he is busy, he is happy and she's happy. This was the first disappointment. He did not satisfy her in that point. In the second disappointment, she discovered in his pocket bills that he did not pay for the house and the other house that she thought he owned. And when she faced him, he just dismissed her. She went to his mother and told him, "Is this house your son's house?" She said, "No, both of the houses are mine. Your husband didn't pay anything. He only pays me rent for the house that you're living. It's good for you that he does not keep you busy with money." Here come the second disappointment. She married a poor man who was unable to pay for his bills. And then came the third disappointment. hearing from people that her husband is a drunk, and she keeps telling them, but Mr. Morel does not take any drink. After that, she realized that he is as drunk as a sponge. So that's these disappointments led her to feel sad and disconnected with her husband. When she gave birth to the boy, she was very ill, but he was good to her. And the boy, when he was born, he was small, frail, but came on quickly. He was a beautiful child. He had dark gold ringlets, dark blue eyes. His eyes gradually became clear gray. His mother loved him passionately. He came just when her own bitterness of disillusion was hardest to bear. Here, her faith in life was shaken, and her soul felt dreary and lonely. So, she made much of the child. She dedicated completely her life to her child, that a matter that made the father jealous. So she despised her husband. She turned completely to the child. She made the child her lover. She turned from the father and she began to neglect him. Okay? So her husband, realizing that he could not do his own responsibilities, he cannot fulfill his obligations, he started to be different from her. And he became hard-tempered and abusive. He started hitting the boy. And that matter made Mrs. Morel loathe her husband. She loathed him for days. And he went out and he drank and he came back and he bullied her and he kept hitting the boy. One day, he was 1 year old and his mother was proud of him. He was very pretty. He had beautiful curly hair that she took a really good attention to. But one day, she was chat. She left. Sorry, she left the father with the child alone, and she dozed off. She fell asleep. And when she woke up, she came downstairs, and to her shock and astonishment, she saw that the father had cut the hairs, the beautiful curls of the boy, and he had cut it in a such bad way that he looked like a sheep that has been cropped. Okay, and this was the breaking point for her. She found the curls of her son, the beautiful, shiny, golden curls like the petals of a marigold scattered in the reddening firelight. For her, it was a shock. She came into a breakdown. She stood still. It was her first baby. She went very white and was unable to speak. Morel, her husband, laughed and said, "Oh, what do you think? Look at him. He looks so beautiful." The mother, she gripped her two fists, lifted them, and she wanted to struck him. "I could kill you. I could." She was filled with rage. He was angry, but then he was frightened by her tone. The mother looked down at the clipped head of her child. She put her hands on his hair and stroked and folded his head. "Oh, my boy," she flattered. Her lips trembled, her face broke. Snatching up the child, she buried her face in his shoulder and cried painfully. She was one of those women who cannot cry, whom it hurts as it hurts a man. It was like ripping something out of her, sobbing. She called this the act of masculine clumsiness. You see the point here? We're getting back to being a man is not everything. Here she thinks that her husband being masculine here was clumsy because it's very stupid the way that he handled it. but she continued to strive with him. Why? Out of moral sense. She says this was a breaking point. Now, this made life much bearable because she had, with the cutting of his son's hair, break all love that she has inside for her. So she doesn't love him anymore. She will remember the scene forever. She continued to strive, and this is very important. She says, it was now a religious instinct, and she was almost a fanatic with him because she loved him or had loved him. If he sinned, she tortured him. If he drank and lied, was often a platoon, sometimes naive, she wielded and lashed unmercifully. This is a very beautiful description. So, in seeking to make him nobler than he could be, she destroyed him. She injured, hurt, and scarred herself, but she lost none of herself. Because why? She had her sons. So, one day, her husband came drunk. She told him, say you are not drunk. So he repeated, say you are not drunk. Well, and he calls her bad names, you bad and nasty little bitch like you see, said, you don't get drunk as a lord on nothing. It means you are paying a lot of money to get drunk as if you are a lord. He says it's a lie. You are lying. And then they keep, you know, exchanging bad language between them. He's drunk. He becomes abusive. He tells her, if I'm a liar, get out of my house. She tells him, no, it's not your house, and you make the house dirty. You see, she says, you are the most despicable liar that ever walked in shoe leather. Yeah. So she was shouting at him. He became angry. Then he just grabbed her and he pulled her out of the house. And then he threw her to the garden and closed the door. She was outside of her garden, and of course, garden lilies. Beautiful description of lilies. In the middle of this fight, she's alone, cold, night, pregnant, tired, insulted. She was out wondering at the beautiful, tall, white lilies. See how important nature it is? She keeps smelling the roses. It made her feel calm and in control. But yet again, she's pregnant and she begun to quiver. She's cold. She cannot knock on the doors and on the windows. She is ashamed of people hearing her. And she didn't want the children to wake up. But she knew that the children woke up and saw their mother in the garden, and feeling helpless, they couldn't do anything to her. They went back to sleep. She kept knocking on the windows and on the doors till he was awakened from his drunkardness. He opened the door, but he was scared of her. So he ran away from her, undressing himself, and went immediately to bed so that he would not face her. Like a woman who endured so much and she's pregnant, she cleaned the house after he broke many things, and she tidied the bed and she slept. Okay, that's very strange. Anyway, so the chapter ends with all this information, rich information. We have many important quotes. These are my favorites. We have many important themes. Oedipus complex, this is the center, and this is the main title. Sons and lovers. The sons love their mother, and their mother love their sons. Okay. We have the bondage, because here they are bound. Everyone is bound with something. She is bound to her husband because of her duty as a woman, bound to her children because of her duty as a mother, and he is bound to her because he is her only family. He's a slave to alcohol. That's why he's bound to being drunk, and alcohol is his bondage. He cannot break it. So you see, bondage, we have it all over, and it's going to be repeated in every chapter. Flashback. Here, Lawrence uses this literary technique throughout the novel. He does not follow a straight linear narrative, sometimes appear out of order, and to watch out for us as we read. He is telling you here, for example, we have two flashbacks. First of all, she wanted to tell us about her husband. She first took us back to her childhood to show us that she is from a very respected family, but she ended up marrying a minor because she thought he's exhausted and made her curious. And then she returns back into another flashback saying that being a man, you can do everything. And then she takes us into a flashback that no, not all men can do anything because her husband is blah, blah, blah. Okay. Masculinity and femininity, this is a very important theme, that they exchange roles, that the father here is not the leading figure in his family, the woman is. The sons think highly of their father, and she thinks that, for example, the father is clumsy. He's not masculine, he's clumsy. That's why he cuts the curls of William. So we have beautiful multiple choices. For example, what event causes William to enjoy himself less at the wake? His mother leaving, his father arriving, the Ferris wheel malfunctioning, or a thunderstorm? Of course, his mother leaving. What does Mrs. Morel not want, and she believes she cannot afford? A summer cottage, a college degree, a laundry machine, or another child? Yes, another child. Where does Mrs. Morel first meet her husband, Walter? A minor union meeting, the wakes, a Christmas party, or a train to London? Very good, a Christmas party. What does Mrs. Morel learn from her husband's mother after 7 months of marriage? He's in debt. He is secretly wealthy. He's a fugitive. He has no education. Yes, he is in debt. What does Mrs. Morel do to William while Mrs. Morel is sleeping? Beats him, gives him a haircut, verbally abuses him, buys him toys. Yes, he gives him a haircut. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you in chapter 2. Thank you.